Welcome back to Sound Pollution. It's a new season for the show, and I want to thank everyone for their patience while I've been away. I am back, and I have a new interview and new music from Corey, the sole musician of Valkyrie A.D, a horror-themed metal band and a very interesting guy. We will be discussing what got him started in the genre, his songwriting process, the stories behind 3 of his tracks, and the long gone days of the horror VHS tapes. Also, this is my first attempt at having a co-host for the show, and I want to thank Michael Moody of Moody's Musics and Recording for joining me for this episode. Hopefully, Michael will join the podcast again now that he sees how it all kind of works. If you are interested in being a co-host for Sound Pollution, please shoot me an email at soundpollutionpodcast@gmail.com, and we're off to the show. I think it will.
You just didn't think you'd be made fun of this quickly, did you?
God, like, can you ease into it? Jesus.
Line of Coke's done. Come on, chop, chop.
Shut up.
All right.
Now I'm nervous because I don't usually have a co-host. So, Corey, you are with Valkyrie A.D. First things first, how'd you come up with that name? Is there a story behind that name?
Yeah, a little bit. So it's a name that comes from mythology, and I don't know if, for anyone who's not too familiar with it, it's kind of the modern interpretation of what a Valkyrie is supposed to be like this angelic maiden that would kind of come down onto battlefields, collect the souls of fallen heroes during the Viking era, and take them to the kingdom of Valhalla, where they would await the battle of Ragnarok or Armageddon. I'm actually really heavily inspired by horror. So when I was reading more about the history of mythology and the history of that actual word, one of the theories is that it wasn't until kind of Valhalla started to be viewed as more of like a hero's paradise that they kind of became maidens. The idea was that they originally were more of kind of these demonic entities that would collect souls to create an army of the dead. And, being so much into horror, that was kind of the definition that I was really kind of drawn to. So I kind of like the idea of having this name to represent this idea of, here's this army of undead, macabre, gross stuff that I sing about, and call it Valkyrie.
Awesome. So what got you interested in music?
So I was, and I guess I still am, a pretty shy kid, very quiet. Grew up in a really small town in Northeast Texas, and I was always just that kid that just felt weird. Not that anybody ever wants to. I just always kind of felt different. And I remember being in elementary school and being in music class, and music was the first time that I was in a room with kids my age, and we were all talking about the same thing, and I kind of felt like I was a part of that conversation. I don't know if that makes sense, but that really kind of started this kind of eye-opening love for music. And then, it just kind of transitioned through like late middle school. I probably, like most angry teenagers, I was really heavily into punk. That was just kind of my thing. And then just kind of made a natural progression through music and through horror into finding metal. And then that's how I am into all the gross stuff now.
What did you start on guitar? Is that what age were you when you started?
So my first instrument was actually a bass. So the town I grew up in, I just really wanted to play with people, and there was a couple guitar players and there were a couple drummers, and no one seemed to know what a bass guitar was. So I was like, well, I'll do it. And that was where I started, and it was probably about a year and a half, 2 years, and then I decided to pick up a guitar too, just to kind of keep trying to see what I could do myself.
Do you play anything else?
I try to play a lot of stuff. I, write everything for Valkyrie. So, I don't consider myself a drummer. I can do some things on the drum. Everything that's on the the releases is done with virtual instruments. It's all MIDI, so there's no true playing there, but I feel like there's a little bit of at least of an understanding of drums. And then through school, I played baritone, could play trumpet and trombone, all the real cool stuff that the chicks dig, and little bit of very rudimentary piano, but yeah, I would definitely say that guitar, specifically rhythm guitar, is really kind of where I prefer to focus.
Now, do you do the lyrics as well? Are you the one singing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I know I could feel you having a technical question.
No, not right off yet. But I was going to say, I know you kind of dismissed yourself with the drums, but I do, as a compliment, I've run sound for metal bands for 10 plus years, and I've recorded a couple of metal albums, real drums, MIDI drums. And one thing I want to compliment you on is the kick drum sounds and the three songs you released. They don't say, a lot of modern metal music has such a clicky kick drum, it kills me. And it really sounded good. It sounded like drums should. So I mean, I know it's all virtual stuff, but you did a good job selecting those.
And it's clean, it's good. What were your influences musically?
The first band that I really got into, I was in the third grade, and I saw the movie Detroit Rock City. And I became the biggest Kiss fan that small town Texas had ever known. That was probably my first favorite band. Listened to them for a little bit, and then I got kind of into skateboarding. So I was, that was really where like that kind of thrashier stuff started being introduced. Then I got really big into Green Day for a while.
You should.
Yeah. It's
like a writer.
2004's American Idiot is why I actually picked up the bass. That was what made me say, like, this is what I should be doing. As far as some of the more modern influences, the big three for me as a songwriter now would be the Black Dahlia Murder, I would say Trivium, and Skeleton Witch.
Now, what was it about the genre of metal, especially like the horror metal, that really stuck out to you?
In the beginning, it was just the aggression. Like I said, as any angsty teenager can identify with, just, the angriest sounding thing you could find just really caught my attention. And I don't really know how I ended up finding some of the stuff that I, have started listening to now, because the scene of the area where I grew up, there really wasn't such a thing as metal outside of, whatever was on the radio. So some of that stuff was more just, some of it might have been forced, like, oh, what can I say that I listen to just to offend people, and then maybe just through association I started liking it. But certainly, as by that point, being a guitar player primarily, there's a lot of riffs in a lot of the death metal stuff. So that was really what I was drawn to first, and then kind of getting used to the screams, the vocals and stuff. All that stuff really just kind of evolved later.
Did you ever play out vocally on stage with other people, or were you just primarily guitar and bass player playing live with other folks?
I've never performed vocals live. I played one show on guitar with a really small local band, and I don't even know if you call it a show.
Were people there?
So it was at a youth group gym of a church. It was like a Saturday night, and like the people in the audience.
Metal that you were doing at the youth group at the church, please.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't. It was someone else's thing. I was just kind of playing with them, but the people in the audience were the other kids that were playing that night. So.
Right, but they weren't playing with you and you were playing.
Okay, yeah. So we played. I played a show.
Give yourself credit.
I find a lot of metal vocalists, by the time they've played live so long, they're used to having a dynamic mic in their hand that they're trying to cup, and then going into production like what you did, it's such an awkward stage for them. And it seems like you've been pretty natural with everything that what you've produced so far.
Yeah, I've always had the goal in mind of doing live shows with Valkyrie and, trying to find that balance between being a guitar player and a vocalist. As corny as it is, I actually, a few times, like when I've done some of the recordings at home, I will try to do the vocal take while I have my guitar.
Mm-hmm.
For exactly that reason, like you're talking about. I don't want to get used to having to hold on to a mic stand or, try to think that the microphone should be right up against my face and then, go to do it for real and the spacing and everything be off. And I don't know if that's something that anyone else other than me would ever think about, but
They do.
Now, right now, you're the sole member. Are you looking to play live? Are you looking for people to play your music?
I am, yeah. And I have so the first release, Tales from the Wicked, came out in March of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And then that summer, I ended up finding a second guitarist locally who was really into it. We were, he and I were playing together. Had some pretty good momentum going. And then obviously the world ended in 2020. And so we, respected each other and took a break. And during that time was when I just went ahead and recorded the second release, Vile, which ended up coming out in August. But then this year we've discussed, getting back together. We've been together a couple times, and he is still on board with the project. The fourth release, probably about 80% written. So I hope to get that to start recording soon. And on that one, I would like for it to be a little bit more collaborative between he and I. He's a bit more of a technical player, so I'd like to use some of that maybe in some of the lead, solos and stuff.
Right, utilize it.
Yeah.
So how many albums have you released now? 3?
2 EPs and a single.
Okay.
But the single was 12 minutes long, so I think that probably counts.
So did you find that this like time that we're going through, like it's like the thing, it's like Harry Potter, don't say its name. Did you use that to your benefit? Did you find that was a good time to write, or were you too frustrated? And there's no right answer to that.
It's kind of funny. It's not like I guess I was fortunate enough that what me and the other guitarist Kevin were finally starting to become was so early in its infancy that it didn't feel like a huge loss. It wasn't like, oh my God, we have to take this big break from this big thing. As far as the writing, I'm one of those people that I don't really feel like I'm ever not writing. Even in the midst of working on a current release, I still feel like I'm working on the next one as well. I had the time, but it's not like I had more time necessarily, at least in that regards. I thought it was kind of funny in a non-funny way. During the time, like you would hear in the news, all of these bands, it's like, oh, so-and-such is announced that they're writing or going into the studio. It's like, what the hell else are you doing? Like, this is kind of your thing, right?
That's what we do anyway. Well, I know for some artists, they had a hard time writing because everything was so negative. And for other artists, they were like, sweet, I'm alone in my apartment forever, and I do all this stuff that I've always wanted to do. So it's been an interesting question. One that I would like to stop asking. I'm ready. I'm ready.
For sure. And as far as like any sort of inspiration from the last year, I've never envisioned Valkyrie as having any sort of like agenda driving it, so I don't really look too much towards current events to try to put any sort of lyrical theme into, at least not consciously. So it wasn't like, oh, I should write a COVID song or I should not write a COVID song. It was just like, I'm just going to write about ghosts again. Which
I love on a personal level.
Do you do all the production yourself? Do you have anything with you have it sound to be mastered, or is this all you?
So the first release, I found a guy who at the time lived locally. He had a little home studio. So we recorded everything there, and then he mixed it and mastered it. His name's Dwayne Williamson. He has Modern Mythology Studios as his. And then for the second one, he ended up relocating to the Pacific Northwest, and I'm in New York State. So I ended up recording all of that myself, and that time I used plugins. I used the Fortin Nameless Suite for the guitar tones, whereas before we were actually miking cabs and amps and stuff. I sent all of that to him, and he mixed it and mastered it. And then on the third one, the single, I did all of that from start to finish myself. So
it's a weird process when you finally start. I was in a band. I was just a demo drummer for a long time, and then I got to where I was recording live stuff just to reference it so we could write more music. And then next thing you know, I was recording, and it's just the progression. It's a cool thing, and like I say, you're doing it all yourself now. But I know some artists that solo artists especially, it doesn't seem like you're in that trap where you just can't release it. You go back and you keep on editing, and and that it's a frustrating thing. Is this going to be good for the world now? Is it not? Is it
Yeah, no, it's for sure that was an issue with the single. My hope is to try to learn everything or to learn something with everything that I do. And with this last one, absolutely, it was a matter of when is the song ever going to be done? And it's funny. It's 12 minutes long, and that song before I started recording it would have easily been twice that length. Because I think maybe a common misconception for some people is it's actually much easier to write a long song than it is to write a short song. It's much easier to just kind of keep going once you kind of get started on a path than it is to like purposefully cut and say, this is where this is going to be over with.
Right.
And then it became a whole new monster when I had to try and mix it and master it without really having a clue outside of what YouTube could teach me as far as saying like, this is actually the sound that I am okay with publishing.
Well, I want to say too on the 12, it had a lot of good changes in it. A lot of stops, a lot. It wasn't just I'm an old Grateful Dead fan at heart, and that same riff would carry on for 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
A lot of stops. Definitely some prog rock or prog metal and, black and thrash for sure, But
So since we're talking so much about that, let's give that a name.
In this haze of green and gold.
So it's a 12-minute song, and that is your most current release.
Yes.
What was the story behind that song?
So for people that may recognize the title, it's actually a reference to Stephen King's The Dark Tower series.
I did. I caught it.
Yeah. So that's a reference in book 7. There's a part of that, and the first time I read that series, which was I don't even know how many years ago, I just read that line and knew instantly that's going to be a song one day.
You do the artwork for Tales from the Wicked?
Yeah, I did.
It was nice. It definitely had a DC comic kind of theme to it, man.
Yeah, that's what I had really hoped for. Obviously, it also does look like it was done with Sharpie because it was. So, there's always a balance.
There's something that is not too overproduced. I really like that. So.
Yeah, I feel like there's a fine line between really DIY and just being like, you could have tried harder,
So it was, other than Stephen King, it's a longer song. Does it feel to you like it's almost several songs together, or is it just telling the story?
I think musically, for sure, there's probably 4 parts to it. Lyrically, it's the same story. So, back to kind of discovering that title without giving anything away, that section of the book deals with the death of a character. And so I always knew that that's what the song would be about. It would be about death. And then, fast forward a few years and I started, putting pen to paper for lyrics. Being death metal, it ended up kind of turning into my death, more of a suicide note, so to say. And that, I think, what in the end ended up influencing kind of the tonal shift, the sonic shift so much, as far as, it does have a lot of like the progressive song structure, but it still has very much of at least what I think to be a kind of a purposeful hold back on the production. And kind of the rationale for that was I wanted to try to convey this feeling of, without, being too depressing and just ruining the night for everyone, through the lens of suicide. What I thought was, as the listener, I think it would be an interesting idea to try to have the song be, very big and momentous and have all of this stuff going on, but there still be that feeling of kind of like a undersold potential, much in the same way of what someone who is left behind from suicide might feel, right? So you have this note and you think, it doesn't matter how poetic or beautiful the words are, the person's still gone, right? So that was really what was kind of the mission statement, so to speak, just from the whole start to finish, once I actually began recording into clicking publish, which is a super dark explanation.
A little bit.
I was telling you. Are you writing? Are you the kind of guy that writes all the time? I mean, just see the pen and pad, and there seems to be, in my experience, people who just all of a sudden it comes to them and they write it all down at once, or somebody writes it down all the time.
At the risk of sounding super pretentious, I like to think that there are people that write songs, and then there are songwriters. And for me, I like to try to think of it more as a songwriter. Like I kind of always, I mean, I have like a running list on my phone of just like titles, ideas like, oh, that's going to be something someday because I read it somewhere. And, talking back to kind of the Tales from the Wicked cover art, that EC comic, like Vault of Horror influence, that's a lot of what the lyrical influence is. I try to picture a song having the ability to translate over to the pages of a comic book. So it's a little bit more of a narrative driven, much, very, very descriptive, very, illustrative, or at least I hope it is.
Which leads me to the next song. Tell us about The Conjuring.
So The Conjuring was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek response. Ultimately the song is about, performing a satanic ritual to give my soul to the devil so that I can be a better guitar player, which, doesn't work. Otherwise I would have made it years ago. But the idea was, when you grow up, especially in, small town Texas, you tell people, oh, you like metal. Well, then they all say, well, then you must worship the devil. So The Conjuring was more of like, okay, yes, sure, here you go. But that song was probably one of the best examples of kind of how songwriting kind of happens for me. For me, it always starts with the guitar riff. And I would say, 9 times out of 10 or so, when I hear the riff, I hear everything. I can hear what the drum's doing, what the bass is doing, what the second guitar, if there is harmony, I can hear a riff and say, okay, this is a verse or a chorus, and I can hear already what the vocal pattern and cadence is going to be. So that song, The Conjuring, from concept to last pinned lyric, was written in like a Saturday afternoon. I just sat down with the guitar and came up with the music almost in a lesser amount of time than it takes to listen to the song now.
That's awesome. I'm jealous.
and I don't know, I've told that story to a few people thinking like, oh, this is how songs are written. And then people are usually like, no, not really. So I don't know. I don't know how much of it was maybe a learned behavior from having been on my own for so long, or how maybe it was an approach I would have had, which has resulted in me staying on my own because maybe people are like, I don't want to fucking work with that guy.
Well, they should work with that guy. So it sounds like a lot of the harder stuff in your life makes it into music for you. Is that kind of how you process it? Do you find it therapeutic almost in a way?
There is certainly a therapeutic release in the writing of the music, just that process of creating something. I don't typically use a lot of that in the lyrics,
Right.
at least not consciously. I'm sure I could talk to a therapist and then they'd read my lyrics and be like, you're not as smooth as you think you are, but I definitely get much more of a release from the song structure than kind of, like we talked about before, trying to have that each song be a statement of some sort.
And the last song that we'll talk about is off your second release, Vile. Death Has Come to Your Little Town. First off, the title made me kind of giggle because I was like, that seems right lately. Tell us about that.
So that's a quote from John Carpenter's Halloween. So that's what the whole song is about. It's about pretty much the whole franchise, but mostly the first movie.
I didn't even put that connection on it.
Yeah.
I'm slow.
Dr. Loomis tells it to Sheriff Brackett before they go a hunting.
What drew you to the, you like, oh my God, I've had such a long day, dude. I am so sorry. Every thought that I just had, like there was a bubble and there was like three little dots and it all went away.
You're doing great.
I thank you.
Is she?
It's so sad when the interviewee's like, yeah, it's fine, keep going, shut up. So you're drawn to darker writing and movies. What drew you to that? Was it again kind of the Texas just to kind of be, you already think I'm strange, so, or was that why they thought that?
So I know the exact moment that I fell in love with horror, and it actually was John Carpenter's Halloween. I'm originally from Dallas, and right after kindergarten we moved out into the country, and that was where I grew up. And the only reason why that's relevant is because this memory takes place specifically in the house in Dallas. So I would have been 5 or younger at the time, and Halloween was on TV. And I don't remember how much I was necessarily watching, but I was at least aware of what was going on. And it was the point in which, Jamie Lee Curtis is, spoilers, slumped over in the doorway. And
by now, then they're slow. So
yeah. Well, people, you never know. She's like, slumped over in the doorway, and then just slowly in the background, the shape sits up. And that was it. I was sold. It's like, the boogeyman is real. All stories are true. And I've been into horror ever since.
Like, do you ever check out like real life haunted houses and stuff that have like all the stories behind it, or for you is it all fiction?
I mean, I'm not a religious person, or a very spiritual person, so it's easy for me now to be like, yeah, it's all fiction. But I have stayed the night in like a haunted bed and breakfast, quote unquote haunted bed and breakfast, and I didn't sleep a wink that night, just because I was like, something's coming. But
I think the moment for me, which is funny because now I'm scared of everything. Like I literally have panic disorder. But I remember watching the original Night of the Living Dead over and over, like in black and white.
Yeah.
Like over and over, and I don't even think I was 12. I was obsessed with it.
Mine was Dawn of the Dead, and
that's a good one.
I'm old enough now that we go to the video rental store. And like my mom would always rent because it was our favorite one, and we constantly rewatched George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. So the whole mall thing and.
That's the one where they're on top of the building and like there's the guy on the other building and he's like Oprah Winfrey.
Oh no, that was
the remake.
Oh, that's oh, I didn't know there was
Yeah,
an original.
oh,
Shit.
Oh my God, you gotta see the original.
I laughed so hard, and then that one had some great music in it too.
Yeah. Well, it was Disturbed and all that.
Yeah, where they took it and then they like did it with jazz music.
Yeah,
elevator music.
So good.
Yeah, no, that was a big part of growing up for me was talking about the movie rental thing. I just I remember in the store in town, it was the back left corner, and just go and just stare at VHS covers and just be like, wow, what could this be about?
Dude,
And then they had to go and close them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no more there's one more Blockbuster somewhere.
Isn't like California.
There's
or
some
something,
random tiny.
Yes, Washington State or some.
Yeah.
place. Someone's gonna ruin it.
Leave it alone. Let it be. Like that was my middle school, high school. I was like, let's go rent a
The
tape.
kids will never understand, and you're not allowed to go behind the curtain,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of
The naughty movie.
But yeah, you're right. The whole horror, and they were all in alphabetical order, and you
Yeah.
go like, oh, have I seen? Do we want to watch I Spit on Your Grave, or
somebody wanted to play with you from your area, how could they get a hold of you? Would like the best way to reach out to you be on your social media? Or do you have an email you'd like to give?
Carrier pigeon.
Carrier pigeon.
No, I am terrible at social media. So I do have an Instagram, Valkyrie _AD. You could always message me there. Or there's a Valkyrie A.D. page on Facebook. I don't know how it works, but there is one.
You're like, I have one. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Or I do have a page on Bandcamp. You can message through there. Yeah. If anyone hears this and wants to do something, I am more than willing to sell out. I will come play in your living room if I have to.
Part of New York, you don't have to give the city, but what part are you in?
I'm in what's called the Southern Tier. I'm near the city of Binghamton. Is the closest thing on the map, I guess.
Is there anything else you want the listeners to know?
So every time I've done a couple interviews, and I always want to try to do two quick little shout outs if I can.
Do it.
So the first one is the guy that I mentioned before, Dwayne Williamson. He has his own little project he's trying to get up off the ground called Beast Mountain. And his album Cryptozoology, it's very like cosmic horror, very doom kind of stoner sludge, whatever you want to call it. But everything I know now as a recording artist is 100% owed to that guy. So ever feeling like I could ever try to do a fourth release, let alone a second release, is because of the time I was able to spend with him. And so I always try to plug him when I can.
And that's Beast Mountain?
Beast Mountain, yep, 2 words. And then the second is there is a horror-themed fitness clothing company out of Pittsburgh called Death Comes Lifting. And
Lifting?
Yeah, Death Comes Lifting. Right after I put out Tales from the Wicked, the main guy there, Zach, he's the first person I reached out to and was like, hey, here's this thing I did. And he was the first person who wasn't a blood relative that listened to music of mine and, was willing to give it a shot. And ever since then, he and I are always communicating back and forth. And I do a little bit of like writing for him on his Patreon page, and he's always plugging my stuff. So for me to ever have the nerve to even send an email to you to be like, hey, can I come on your show is 100% because he told me yes the first time. So it's a little metal community over there too. So it's
It's like metal workout clothes.
Yep. It's all.
So that.
It's like he's got some like Black Sabbath themed shirts, some Black Flag stuff.
Yes.
It's pretty cool. Pretty genius.
It is.
Hey everyone, there's a new season of Sound Pollution coming your way. I know it's been a really rough 18 months and we are not out of the dark yet, but I'm going to keep bringing you new independent artists, their music, and their stories, as well as some updates from fabulous musicians that have been here before. I will be introducing you to the occasional guest co-host this fall as well. Will I find a permanent partner for the show? If you're interested in being a guest musician on Sound Pollution or want to co-host an episode, shoot me a message at soundpollutionpodcast.com or soundpollutionpodcast@gmail.com. Be love and make some noise.
You're three releases in. With a fourth one 80% done, you're doing great.
Well, thank you.
I just wish, just like with all the other independent artists that I interviewed, it's hard to be an independent artist. That's what nobody talks about. It's to do everything on your own and keep releasing music just for the love of releasing music. Like, that's something special.
Yeah, I think if I could just really focus on learning the production to the point where I would actually just feel more comfortable with it, I wouldn't really mind the independent aspect of it as far as recording and releasing stuff. The solo artist gets a little old sometimes. One of my biggest concerns about being a solo artist is just sounding stale. Because so long as it's me, it's going to be the same hands playing the same influences, writing the same words, and I don't want to put out something that someone's going to go, oh, it's the same thing he did with a new name on it. So, that's something to try to. Why I would really like to bring different people in to try to kind of keep that fresh perspective, but also the biggest pro of being a solo artist is I don't have to coordinate with anybody. So when I'm ready to record, I just come in here and hit record. I don't have to, wait for people to come over. Or
I had a guy tell me one time, and because I always give I always say I'm just a dumb old drummer, and I've been doing this for a long time, and somebody stopped me at the end of the session or rehearsal session one time, like you don't realize how many times that you stopped or you did something just a fill here and then change directions, that it influenced how the song was written. So yeah, if you're coordinating or collaborating with other people, it does change, and sometimes it challenges you and whatnot. But yeah, and like I say, I think you're doing great, and I've listened to it, and it all sounds great. So, and I've been around metal musicians and recordings for 100 years, I guess. So
it really is good.
Well, thank you.
It really is good.
All right, everybody, that was episode 51 of Sound Pollution with Valkyrie A.D. I want to thank Corey so much for being on the show. I want to thank Michael for being a guest co-host, and I want to thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Sound Pollution on whatever listening platform you are using, and click those links below to show this artist some attention. Remember, get vaccinated, wear a mask, be love, and make some fucking noise.